All the news coming out of San Diego Comic-Con, we are eating good, ladies and gents. So in this video, I want to experiment with an idea. I want to run over all the different characters who are supposed to be appearing in Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, specifically in the multiverse in this video. Keeping in mind, none of this is true until Marvel confirms it or we see it in a trailer. So of course, sticking with the multiverse characters here, the OG Avengers. And I know it doesn't really seem multiverse. It was the first 10 years. It was based in the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the entirety of Marvel's What If is predicated on alternate reality depictions of the original Avengers. Now, unlike what we saw in Avengers Endgame, where basically the whole film was based around their time travel shenanigans and they were the meat and potatoes of it all, just showing up at different points in time over the first 10 years, if the OG Avengers show up here, I don't really think they're going to have a significant presence. If anything, I think it'll just be a nod to the fact that we're just kind of remembering the first 10 years and moving on from there, because Marvel's made it very clear that we're in a new era of storytelling and that needs to be focused on. That takes us into the next group, which is actually three groups. Three versions of the Fantastic Four. Now, of course, we have Pedro Pascal and all those guys in the upcoming Fantastic Four film at the time that I'm recording this video. I have long since said that the ending of the Fantastic Four film should have the team captured by the Kang Dynasty, because the Kang Dynasty is basically being removed by Marvel Studios to make way for Doctor Doom. And the best way to do this is, with the Fantastic Four captured, there's essentially a kind of rescue mission, quote unquote, which actually turns out to be a sneak mission, right? They're there to get the Fantastic Four out as fast as possible, because while the Fantastic Four are being held captive in the headquarters of the Kang Dynasty, the Kang themselves are being massacred by what we now know to be Robert Downey Jr., Doctor Doom, and his army of Doombots, because they're seizing control of the Kang Dynasty headquarters in order to affect whatever he wants his plan to be for his involvement in the multiverse. Again, we don't know exactly how Robert Downey Jr.'s Doctor Doom is going to unfold. We know the Fantastic Four film is going to be an origin film, and as I understand it, we also know that it's going to feature Franklin and Valeria Richards, which is cool. For those of you guys who don't know who they are, Franklin Richards is of course the son of Reed and Susan and has the power to alter reality on a universal scale. His powers are so extreme, they actually scare Galactus. Valeria Richards is the daughter of Reed and Susan, and she's every bit as smart as her father and even Doctor Doom. So it's cool to see these two characters popping up. Again, what their involvement's going to be, no idea. But then we have the 2015 Fantastic Four, which no one's excited to see them. Michael B. Jordan, sure, but honestly, and this has been a thing that's been going around for a long time on the internet, and I didn't know that I needed it until I saw it, Miles Teller from this version of the Fantastic Four would make an amazing version of the Maker, which is the version of Reed Richards from the original Ultimate Universe in Marvel Comics. That's what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is based on. That guy became a bad guy, and he was really cool. So like a villain version of Reed, Miles would be perfect for that role. Then of course we have the original Fantastic Four, Jessica Alba, who was every guy's crush back in the day. I had the biggest crush on her. But seeing that original team up here would actually be great, because those of you guys who never grew up during that era of Marvel comic book movies, there was something special about those old school Fantastic Four films. They weren't nearly as dark as a lot of the comic book movies that you see coming out now. They were very lighthearted. There were some moments that were very cringy, but if you're looking for like a feel-good, quote-unquote superhero movie, those were the ones to go watch. And so seeing that team show back up would actually provide a kind of flight of fantasy lightheartedness to what will undoubtedly be a couple of pretty dark films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But moving outside of the Fantastic Four, right, and continuing on here, of course, God Loki. Now, those of you guys who didn't really follow up on Loki seasons 1 and 2, I do have a video that will basically get you caught up. But God Loki is Loki as you knew him from Avengers and all those different films. That's basically holding the multiverse together right now. The multiverse exists in the Marvel Cinematic Universe because Loki brought it back to life, and he's literally channeling his power through it and keeping it all there. We know he is supposed to return because he's the linchpin of the multiverse. I've been arguing for a while. What Marvel's going to do at the end of Secret Wars is they're going to New Earth the multiverse, which is to say they're going to wipe the multiverse out and they're going to create a singular timeline, maybe call it New Earth. I don't know. That's what DC did with Crisis on Infinite Earths in the 1980s. But regardless, this version of Loki is going to die and the multiverse is going to die with him. And maybe a spark of life or something like that will give birth, quote unquote, to the new universe. And that's how the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to consolidate all these alternate reality characters down into one singular universe. Now, of course, we're also going to see Sylvie. All of you guys who saw Loki are familiar with Sylvie. She was an alternate reality version of Loki whose timeline was eradicated because of all the things that were taking place in Loki and the nature of the sacred timeline. Again, that video that I have will get you caught up. Sylvie was a really important character in the first 2 seasons, right? She's the one that initially killed He Who Remains, that set in motion the collapse of the multiverse, and Loki basically having to be the one to save it after essentially learning the ability to time travel. But it would be cool to see her character come back and play some kind of a role. Again, I don't really know what her role would be. We know she's like associated with the Time Variance Authority and everything now, but something that I think would be really cool is that because she was so significant in the Loki series and because she has all the powers and capabilities of a Loki, that the versions of Loki that we saw in his self-titled TV show, we could see those guys come back and we could basically see Sylvie leading the equivalent of a Deadpool Corps, except it's composed of Lokis, right? Just all these different Lokis from across the multiverse. And that kind of leads us into like Deadpool and Wolverine. These guys, I think, are going to have a very, very interesting role to play in Doomsday and Secret Wars. Because if I'm a betting man, they're going to end up leading the Exiles. Now, for those of you guys who don't know who the Exiles are, and most anybody who's been on this channel for a while already does, the Exiles were a team of superheroes that came together from across the multiverse. So for the sake of discussion here, let's say that Deadpool and Wolverine are part of the Exiles, but then they get like Sabretooth from some alternate reality that we haven't seen, where like he killed all the X-Men. And maybe they bring in Cassandra Nova as part of the team as well. It's just a coming together of different characters. Sometimes they were villains, sometimes they were heroes, but they basically banded together in order to keep the multiverse protected from the various threats that were trying to destroy it. Of course, we know we're also going to see Hunter B-15 as well as Mobius. I will say, I think it would be cool to see Morbius, and I think it'd be hilarious to have a moment where like the two of them go back and forth because a single letter is what differentiates their names. And maybe we'll get to see Morbius say like, it's Morbin time. We know the top's going to come off the theater when that happens. But that takes us out of the TVA, right? The Time Variance Authority characters. And it moves us into the X-Men. This is where I think things could potentially get amazing when it comes to Doomsday and Secret Wars, because as the self-proclaimed world's biggest X-Men fan, I can tell you right now, the most powerful people in the Marvel Universe are the X-Men, right? Unlike Avengers, right? The Incredible Hulk or Thor or something like that, their power isn't restricted to what are basically Superman archetypes, super strength, super speed, and that's basically it. The powers of mutants in Marvel Comics run the gamut, right? Their limit is imagination. So you have mutants like the Marquis of Death, Clyde Wincham, who can wipe out whole universes with a wave of his hand, all the way down to like guys like Quicksilver, who can just run super fast. So the X-Men would literally be the ones that would determine who comes out on top of this. If the X-Men were to like side with Doctor Doom, for example, it's game over for everybody. But if the X-Men side with the superheroes, which of course they would do, then that's how the superheroes win. They're that powerful. So first here, of course, the older X-Men. And when I say the older X-Men, I'm talking about the ones from like the original X-Men movies that we saw, right? With Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen and all that kind of stuff. It'd be awesome to see these guys return, especially Femke. Like it'd be awesome to see her show back up again. But the cool thing here is that it would give us a chance to potentially see some reconciliation. We know that like the older X-Men movie universe basically concludes with Logan, but there's huge time gaps there, right? We don't know what happened between like the ending of Days of Future Past and like the Logan film, except for the fact that the X-Men were killed. Specifically, they were killed by Xavier himself. And so even if their involvement here is in the same limited capacity as the original Avengers, where it's more just based on cameos, it would be cool to kind of get some consolidation there and see exactly how things played out when Xavier originally killed the X-Men in the events leading up to Logan. Again, we don't necessarily know, I just think it'd be a cool idea. Then of course there's the younger X-Men. This is Michael Fassbender and so on and and so forth. Honestly, if Marvel's going to take a team of X-Men that already exist and roll them over into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I could easily see them doing it with the younger version of the X-Men. Truth to tell, they're probably going to launch their own unique X-Men team that's going to stand alone from everything else that exists out there. But the other thing here in the next team is the animated X-Men. Now, truth to tell, as much as I love the original X-Men team and the younger depiction of the X-Men team, the animated X-Men is my favorite. And honestly, I don't think I'm alone in that. I think there's a lot of people out there coming out of X-Men 97, or a lot of old school fans like myself who grew up with X-Men the Animated Series and loved Bo DeMaio's work on X-Men 97, who look at this animated X-Men team and say like, these guys are it, man. The cool thing here, and this is what I think is going to be really, really fascinating, if they keep them animated, would it come off a little too strong to the average movie audience to see animated characters running around with live action characters? Or is it going to give off too much of a campy, cool world, Roger Rabbit type of vibe? I don't necessarily know. I know that as a comic book fan and strictly as a comic book movie fan, I wouldn't really care, but I'm not the target audience. And I'm curious from you guys, let me know down in the comments how you guys would feel about seeing live action characters like live action X-Men running around with animated X-Men. But this of course leads us into the Spider-Man characters. Now this is where things get a little murky because as most everybody knows by now, right, it's in the public consciousness, Sony owns the film rights to Spider-Man and all of Spider-Man's related properties. So that's the reason why Sony gets to make the movies and Sony gets to decide what happens with the character in film. Marvel basically just borrows it, but of course we'd get Tobey Maguire, Tom Holland, and Andrew Garfield. Now what's cool about this is we know that like Tom Holland is the Marvel Cinematic Universe version of Spider-Man. And I'm sure some kind of backdoor deal has been worked out to where Marvel Studios is going to be able to use him for the foreseeable future, and Sony gets everything else. Exactly how Tom Holland is going to fit into all of this is anybody's guess, because you haven't really heard hide nor hair from his character since the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, he's not been seen once. So we don't really know what his life looks like outside of the ending of that film and him basically starting over. There were a lot of discussions out there in the aftermath of that film about how Tom Holland's Spider-Man was basically the Nexus Spider-Man, the main Spider-Man, and that everything sort of revolved around him. But I think that got quelled pretty fast and was replaced with the fan theory that it's actually Tobey Maguire. Now that fan theory may be based on really nothing more than just nostalgia, the fact that so many people grew up with Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, so they want him to be the main guy. But whether it's Tobey or whether it's Tom, the point is this is going to give us these various Spider-Man related characters. Now I do have different ideas on how the Spider-Man and Spider-Woman characters should be rolled in to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know there's a lot of people out there who are very much on the fence of like the Miles Morales into the Spider-Verse films being put into the Multiverse saga, being involved in all of this. And it makes sense given a lot of the shenanigans that have been going on over the course of the Multiverse saga and how poorly it's largely been received by most Marvel fans. People don't want something as fantastic as the Into the Spider-Verse films potentially being thrown into the Multiverse saga and possibly messed up. But I do think there's something to be said about how cool it would be to see Miguel O'Hara and Spider-Gwen and Miles Morales and whoever else we want to bring in, Peter B. Parker, rolling over and encountering Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire, and Andrew Garfield. I still think a lot of fans are going to look at that and they're going to say, like, regardless of how this pie is cut, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man should be the one leading the charge. And I think it'd be cool. I agree with that. I like the idea that like the Spider-Verse unites against like Doctor Doom and whatever else happens in Secret Wars. And Tobey Maguire is the one who's leading all the Spider-Man into the charge because he kind of has that father's wisdom, right? And so bringing that to the rest of the Spider-Verse would really make things enjoyable. Now, of course, as far as like purebred multiverse characters go, there's Doctor Strange and Clea. Last we saw with their characters at the end of Doctor Strange 2, Stephen Strange was basically going to the dark dimension with Clea to presumably deal with Dormammu in some capacity, and the idea that there's incursions going on out there. America Chavez still seems to be a part of everything that's going on. There's also the Scarlet Witch who's supposed to be getting her own solo project, but we don't really know what her involvement in all of this would be because seemingly she was killed at the end of Doctor Strange 2. So exactly how they invoke her character, bring her back, is truly anybody's guess. I'm excited to find out, but I'm just kind of curious. Now, this leads into two characters who are actually two of the most powerful characters in the entirety of the Marvel Cinematic Universe that Marvel Studios just hasn't really seemed to adequately flesh out yet. Of course, I'm talking about Binary, who is Maria Rambeau from the Marvel's film, the alternate reality version of Monica Rambeau's mom, as well as Monica Rambeau herself. Now, I say these two are so astronomically powerful because while Binary is technically the Carol Danvers or the Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel, whatever you want to call her, of her own universe, Monica Rambeau is ridiculously broken, at least if they adapt her character adequately going into the future of the MCU beyond what we saw in the Marvels. The reason why I say that is because in the comics, Monica Rambeau is a being composed of pure energy, and she can manipulate and control any and all forms of energy. And in fact, it was seemingly hypothesized by the Blue Marvel and Black Panther that she could manipulate reality on not just a universal, but a multiversal scale, because everything is just matter and energy. We haven't seen her get to that point, but it's the fact that she could. We do know that historically, Marvel has steered away from depictions of extreme powers, but because of the Scarlet Witch's actions in WandaVision going into Doctor Strange 2, coming off the heels of Thanos using the Reality Stone in Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, that Marvel doesn't really seem to be steering away from it as much as they used to, and so they might be willing to lean more into these characters like Franklin and Monica that have incredible levels of power. And then of course you go into the What If cast, and this is Uatu the Watcher, Captain Carter, Strange Supreme, Kahari. We don't really know exactly how her character is going to be involved. Very little has been indicated in terms of what role that they will play. We know Uatu the Watcher and Captain Carter are touring around the multiverse. We saw that at the end of What If Season 2, but how Strange Supreme factors in and how Kahari factors in, we don't really know with those characters. I'm excited to find out, but we don't definitively know. And honestly, I think Strange Supreme returning is due more to fan demand because of how much they love that character, as opposed to like an actual need for him to appear. But then you go into your miscellaneous guys, right? You get Elektra, you get Ben Affleck's Daredevil, Wesley Snipes' Blade, and then Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider. Again, I think outside of Wesley Snipes' Blade and Elektra, these are probably going to be cameos, right? Ben Affleck's Daredevil and Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider is a little finicky here. We know that Marvel is currently working on their own Midnight Suns project, which is going to feature Marvel Studios' own version of the Ghost Rider. We don't know exactly how that's going to, again, involve in everything. But if Marvel decides to update Nicolas Cage's depiction of the Ghost Rider to be closer in line with the comics, but not as historically powerful as he is in the comics, he'll still be a powerhouse nonetheless. More than enough to take on virtually anybody here outside of the high-level reality warpers. But again, most likely a cameo in this instance. And when I say cameo, I think a lot of this might really come down to something similar to what we saw in The Flash, where it's just these glimpses into alternate realities that involve these characters that we've seen before, and that's basically about it. But there's no real way to know for sure until Marvel Studios officially announces it. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Let me know about any other characters that you're interested in seeing, because these are just characters that exist in different iterations across the multiverse or are currently out in the multiverse. This does not include existing characters who just reside on Earth in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.